and a lot of the members who've been with IUCN for a long time. So it's a very important opportunity, and let's speak as one. This is also in preparation for the World Conservation Congress of IUCN. Tell the world what are our challenges and what are our solutions as well. Let's not keep going to these congresses and saying, oh, we have problems and we come up with our solutions. Let's teach the world that we do have solutions for our continent in conservation, right? So, can I hear a loud yes? One Africa, one voice during Congress. That's all I really wanted to say. And this message is very strong. Please remember it in all your discussions.
Ladies and gentlemen, moving on, a quick dive into the culture of the continent. We're going to have 3 dance troupes, one from Burundi, the other from Rwanda, and the third from Kenya, the Bomas of Kenya specifically. So I was told that the tone of the session was to be friendly and informal. So I shall let you into my first secret of the day, and that is, I don't know the order in which they're going to come. But I have a suspicion that we may start with Burundi. Let's see what happens when I call them in. And we haven't rehearsed anything either, so they might come in from the right, but I'm going left. Somebody suggested that I should dance. That's a mistake.
Yesu uyu mwari wo mwiza urakaza umusanganizi impundu z'urwunge urakaza kaneza usanzwe gukunda urakaza urakaza furazi wacu ushaka we n'inshuti n'umuryango aye urakaza 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 furazi wacu ushaka we n'inshuti n'umuryango aye bivugwa ko amahirwe aza rimwe mu buzima nk'urumuri rutazima wanziye mu buzima koko guhirira inyuma ntabyo yigeze kuko avuga ngo ni mu nteko y'intwari gusa mama we
Ladies and gentlemen, we await the Bomas of Kenya. Asanteni sana. Ladies and gentlemen, Her Excellency Razan Al Mubarak, IUCN President, Dr. Gretel Aguilar, IUCN Director General, IUCN councillors from Africa, regional committee chairs from Africa, Ms. Laurence So, West and Central Africa, Dr. Brahim Adan, North Africa, Dr. Adelbert Aine Omuchungozi, East and Southern Africa, 3 regional directors from Africa, Ms. Nana Touré, Mr. Maher Majoub, and Dr. Kour. Mesdames et messieurs, cette année, inspirée par le pouvoir du tout premier congrès africain des aires protégées de l'IUCN, tenu en juillet 2022, l'IUCN organisera un seul forum de conservation de l'Afrique, combinant les 3 sous-régions, plus de 700 représentants, membres de l'Union, partenaires et supporters se réuniront pour cet événement. Co-organisé avec le Comité national des membres de l'IUCN au Kenya, en coopération avec le gouvernement du Kenya, par le biais du ministère du Tourisme et de la Faune, l'ACF vise à évaluer les progrès de la conservation, à revoir les objectifs prioritaires stratégiques pour que les principaux acteurs africains puissent mieux relever les défis concernant l'environnement et la biodiversité. Conservation Forum for the powerful Union of Members Conservation Congress 2025 to be held in Abu Dhabi. It will be an opportunity for increased knowledge and increased capacity between key IUCN members, bringing the conservation community closer to achieving the rallying call 30 by 30, that is 30% of designated protected conservation areas worldwide by the year 2030. Tipping points to bring about a just world which values and conserves nature. Ladies and gentlemen, from Burkina Faso, the Honorable Roger Barrow. We have the Minister of Environment, Science and Technology Innovation from Ghana, the Honorable Peter Derry. We have the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change from Somalia, His Excellency Ahmed Omar. And we have the Minister for the Environment from Sao Tome and Principe, the Honorable Nilda Borges. Ladies and gentlemen, right, wait a minute. One mustn't get flustered. Let me try again. May I invite the IUCN Director General, Dr. Gretel Aguilar, to make some remarks. Madame.
morning, bonjour, bon dia. Your Excellency Razan Al Mubarak, IUCN President, welcome. Council members, ministers, dear members, colleagues, friends. As the Director General of IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature, allow me to begin by thanking you for being here and for being part of the Africa Conservation Forum, where together we will unite for nature and people. It is wonderful to see IUCN in Africa coming together as a union. It is the first time we are holding a forum as one continent. And I know this was the correct decision because the voices of Africa are better and stronger together. In this wonderful setting, where you can look outside the building and see Nairobi National Park stretching all the way into the horizon, I know that we can be inspired to unite for nature and people. Let me tell you that you are making history. For us to be here, many people and institutions had to join forces. So allow me to thank the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife for the Republic of Kenya. You have been such a strong and crucial state member and writing a new chapter for IUCN. You are leading so many conservation efforts across Africa, benefiting people, but also this beautiful Africa and this beautiful planet that we have. In IUCN, we are proud of the national and regional committees' achievements. Ultimately, you are IUCN, supported by the knowledge that commissions and experts worldwide generate and assisted by a capable secretariat. Please also remember that we have a Contributions for Nature platform, a tool where you can share your achievements and demonstrate Africa leadership to the world. Since 1948, Africa has been an important part of the Union, and I would like to recognize the 76 years where we have made history together. This is a continent with exceptional people and natural resources. The past 2 days of the pre-forum show me your energy and power, with so much discuss and share. Within 48 hours, the event highlighted the creative innovators tackling plastic pollution while contributing to their country's economies. The bridge builders creating common ground between the agriculture and nature conservation agendas, the indigenous peoples and local communities who are showing the world how we should learn from them in order to truly achieve nature conservation and much more. One thing that particularly struck me was the power of Africa's youth. This is a young continent where the median age is 19 years old. By 2030, more than 40% of the planet's youth are expected to be in Africa. By 2050, 1 in 4 people on the planet will be from this continent. It is clear that Africa's united voices will have an enormous effect on the planet's future. So let us also remember that 1/4 of the world's biodiversity is in the hands of this continent. This ranges from the Congo Basin forest, which is one of the green lungs of the earth, to the 30,000 kilometers of coastlines that hug these shores and support the lives of millions. Biodiversity and thriving ecosystems have allowed people to satisfy their basic needs, such as food, water, and medicine. This is essential for our economies and societies, and ultimately for our well-being. To conserve and protect this astonishing nature, it is clear that we need all sectors coming together, from agriculture, finance, infrastructure, and many more, because the environmental sector cannot continue to journey alone. By joining forces, governments, civil society, as well as indigenous peoples and global communities can overcome the linked biodiversity and climate crisis. Together, we can create solutions that help people and nature thrive. Let me emphasize this once more. People must be at the center of our actions, and it will not be possible to conserve natural resources successfully without recognizing the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities. Justice, human rights, and equitable distribution of benefits are not just words that we wave from banners and flags. They are values that need to be lived in our daily lives and actions that we need to always carry out, no matter what we do. The only way to ensure that nature thrives is by making sure that people thrive. So here we are today to listen to you, dear members. Over the next 3 days, we will hear about a wide range of subjects, such as regenerative agriculture, sustainable finance, nature-based solutions, and much, much more. We will talk about the 20-year strategic vision for the Union and about the next quadrennial program that will guide IUCN from 2026 to 2029, and which you power as members will shape for nature and people when we work together. Let me invite you to look down at your badges. Right in the center, you will see one simple phrase: African Solutions for Nature and People. I hope these words will guide all of us as we start the forum. So let us unite for nature. This week, singing to the rhythm and melody of African voices, full of wisdom, energy, and hope, we will make change possible and bring prosperity to people and the planet. Thank you, merci, obrigada, shukran.
Ladies and gentlemen, time now to hear from our keynote speaker. But before that, a heads up that we will have to make a hard stop at 9:50, 10 minutes to 10, to clear this hall, first of all, for the official opening, for security reasons. So again, I crave your indulgence, those of you who are running panels. Everything is as per the program. We just have to speed things up a bit. So our keynote speaker, with a 3-year tenure since last year, is the first African chairperson of IPBES, the Intergovernmental Science Ad. I sat beside her on a plane from England. Now look how he's grown. Dr. David Abura.
Thank you very much, Uncle. Okay, thank you. Indeed, it's a real honor and pleasure for me to be standing up here in front of you all. All protocols observed. If I can have the slides on the screen, please. So speaking as an African scientist and conservationist, as the IPBES chair as well, from that role as the first African chair, about African solutions for nature and people. Now, I don't have much time, so I will run through quite quickly some of my slides. And I'll make a bit of a disclaimer, because what I hope to do is to really present some big picture integrative observations, not to get into the detail of individual conservation contexts that many of you are facing, but I hope that you can really see what you do in the picture that I paint over here. I'll have a very strong focus on equity, and equity for all, and acknowledging, of course, being inclusive of indigenous peoples and local communities who are present here in the room. And so please see your context in this narrative that I'll go through, a brief introduction, and then walking through some of African challenges and opportunities in conservation, sustainability, inequality in finance, and then perhaps how we can move forward through IUCN's new plans for the coming work program and the vision coming up ahead. So, sustainable development. I'm a great fan of the Sustainable Development Goals, but when you put them in a circle, like I've done up above, and look at a local place to try and see how does sustainability work in a given context, rather than looking at the intergovernmental space. And when you look at a local context, such as this coastal fishing community, which is what I work in on the coast of East Africa, you can look at the individual stories of people. So in this case, this wonderful graphic from an online illustrated journal shows a couple in the fishing community, Hamisi and Mariam, who of course fish and sell the fish in the markets. Their income depends on the health of the reef. There's community conservation areas that are also shared by other interest groups, tourist operators and so on. And the important thing in this space is how these benefits from nature might be shared amongst the community. And so you can look at the goals in each of these pieces of the story across all of the 17 goals in very natural language. Now, in IPES, what we do is we put together these large and very complex assessment reports, and I'm not going to go into detail on those, but in order to do that, and 3 that are upcoming at the end of this year, 2 at the end of this year, 1 at the end of next year, very pertinent to the discussions that we're having. But in order to organize this work, we have 2 framings that are very important for us in moving forward. So one is a conceptual framework, and I'll explain this in a little bit more detail in the next slide, as well as the concept of nature's contributions to people or ecosystem services. Now, in terms of the conceptual framework, what we did was we ran a 2-year process with a lot of scientists, really looking at how nature, as a foundation, provides contributions to people that support a good quality of life and societal benefits, and then the various indirect and direct drivers in that interaction web. But it's a very inaccessible framework for many non-scientists, and so I've been thinking as the chair, how do we really interpret this more, communicate about it, and thinking about nature, economy. That's basically how we use benefits from nature that we commodify and we extract and then we sell in our markets. The societal benefits we get from those, and then the various indirect and direct drivers that cascade down. And looking at it this way, with the Sustainable Development Model, this provides a much more practical view on daily life from the conceptual framework, in terms of trying to understand actions on nature, which is what we are all concerned about, but also the linked actions on economy and on society that we need to do to make that conservation work. And in doing this, we can relate all of this to the global policy frameworks, but we can focus on the tangible actions on the ground and in our work, rather than worrying about these large targets and so on that many others can look at in terms of reporting and so on. So then the nature's contributions to people, this particular box coming out of nature to economy. This is important because this is where the impacts on nature come from. And if we're hoping to sustain nature and rebuild nature into the future, we really need to understand how do we manage these, our extraction and what we take out from nature. We identified in the global assessment in 2019 18 contributions. This is a table, and they go from number 1 is habitat creation and maintenance, all the way down to number 18 is maintenance of options into the future. You can see from this table what we try to do is to show in the columns that most of these are declining, all those arrows pointing down in the red column on the left, but some are increasing. And of course, if you look at those closely, what we realize is that the reason that those are increasing is because those are the ones that we commodify and we extract and we maximize. So energy, food, materials from nature. And in maximizing their extraction, we're of course driving the decline of all of the other contributions and of nature itself. Number 4, regulation of climate, I've put there, carbon sequestration, that's the next one. We're commodifying now. And of course, the risk is that if we do it the same way, we'll just drive the others down as well. And the importance of that model, sorry if I go back a step, is that if we understand all of these 18 contributions from nature in trying to optimize our utilization of those we're interested in, we must make sure we're not undermining the production of the others and undermining the health of nature in the process. Two slides on the urgency of action, why we need to act quickly and now. So one, looking at the global population and economy, and we've had debates over 5 decades now about global population and impacts on the planet. This graph shows growth in global wealth and global population from 1970 to 2020 on the right. You can see that global population has indeed doubled in that time, but global wealth, or the economy, has gone up 25 times in that time. So here the message is that, is it the global population or our economic activities and growth in wealth that are really the problem driving the declines in nature? We understand this very well now through planetary boundaries work, the great acceleration, showing all of these indicators shooting up through the roof related to economic activity. Population can be a problem though, and we need to watch out for this. Africa's population is not having an impact at the global level now, but we do know that locally overpopulation does degrade ecosystems, does over-extract resources, and as Africa's population grows, it will grow to have global significance, but also because of economic growth, which we need to have to bring people out of poverty. Of course, that impact will become more important globally in the future. And then climate change. We know this is a big challenge. I've chosen to illustrate it using this graphic, which shows the cumulative carbon dioxide emissions of countries from pre-industrial times up until last year. It's the total amount of carbon dioxide that has been emitted that is important, rather than the year-to-year amount. And you can see that certain countries have much larger footprints than others. Africa's contribution has been just 3% of that total. So a very small amount, and the worrying figure is that there's only 5 years to go to consume the remaining carbon dioxide budget that we have to stay within 1.5 degrees of warming. I'll come back to this graph a little bit later. And this graph of global average temperature increasing, this one is designed to show that it's still going up very rapidly, that we've reached about 1.27 degrees warming last year. We're projected to cross 1.5 degrees warming within 10 years, but that's on a 20-year average. We've already almost hit that last year, and we're very likely to hit 1.5 degrees in the coming years. And so this is a real crisis that we need to face, not just for ecosystems, but of course for people and economies as well. So moving into some of our challenges and opportunities, starting with some conservation ones. Now, Africa's richness in biodiversity and ecosystem services is well known. This graphic in the middle is from the IPBES regional assessment produced in 2018. And then the indicators that IUCN is so well known for, the IUCN Red List of Species and the Red List of Ecosystems, showing worrying amounts of orange and red, and that of course, is increasing. Now, what we are very well focused on, and a lot of focal activity in the conservation community is focused on protected areas. I won't go through this slide because I think it's most familiar and I don't have so much time. But the problem is that even in protected areas, we're not necessarily able to slow or reverse the decline of nature. This is a very nice integrative study. I'll just use this as an illustration showing in several parts of Africa. Within protected areas in orange, bird populations are declining, but they're declining faster outside of those protected areas. And the reason is because of all the different challenges that we're working on, and I hope many of you see the areas that you're working on in that list. So of course we see things like climate change, human-wildlife conflict, infrastructure development, and so on. And for the bird example, some specific, the manifestation of these challenges in relation to the declining bird populations summarized by this study. Now, what this really points towards is the need to look outside of protected areas, of course, because there are many projects are doing that and people focused on this. But as we progress towards a fully crowded planet on land and in the sea in terms of our activities, we really need to look at protection and conservation across 100% of space. And this is the importance of spatial planning on land and in the sea, that we really plan at 100% levels across all spaces of what's happening within our landscapes. This illustration is from the IPCC IPBES workshop report in 2021. pointing out these sort of three different types of areas, which I'll come back to. Sort of the blue circles outlines the natural spaces. They're remote wilderness areas that are mostly intact. In yellow is shared spaces where there is agriculture, there's pastoralism, there's production, fisheries, and so on. Moderate human densities as well, but in tune with nature and managing the regenerative capacities of nature effectively. And then in red, the intensive agricultural zones and urban zones where nature is not recognizable anymore, the original biomes. And so the question here is what proportion needs to be intact, supporting global values of nature at planetary levels, versus well-functioning. And this is places that support services with a people lens, thinking about people living on landscapes and in seascapes. How do people survive and make their livelihoods and so on? So this is the framing that the Earth Commission, a group that I've been working with recently, working on planetary scale boundaries, has been looking at a safe and just operating space in relation to key planetary systems or Earth systems. I've been focused on the biodiversity one because that's the area that I work in, but also for that biodiversity boundary, my main interest has been, there are two of these, if I can, there's a boundary looking at intact ecosystems and a boundary looking at altered ecosystems and their ability to support people. Now, the ecosystem intactness is the variable that we use to look at intact ecosystems, and I've put the text up on the screen. But I'm more interested in discussing, in terms of solutions for nature and people, how do we really resolve the challenges that undermine people's livelihoods and undermine conservation across most landscapes and seascapes that we work with, and undermine the intact areas as well if they become too degraded. And so this, we've used the term functional integrity. This is because we're looking at the ecosystem integrity and the ability to provide functions, to provide nature's contributions to people. And we did a study looking at a range of NCPs on the right there, so things like pollination or erosion control and things like that. And the key thing there is that nature needs to be present in local spaces for these benefits to be accessible to people. One, because, for example, vegetation only protects the soil if it's right there on site, but also it has to be within the space of people to access those benefits. And so this applies a justice lens as well. We are very focused on not just the safe part, but the just part of this equation. And we found we decided to look at the square kilometer scale because this corresponds to the activity space of most people, of many people. And if you have 20 to 25% high function, well-functioning or semi-natural vegetation or habitat on land in every square kilometer, you can provide most ecosystem services to people. The problem is currently, of the altered landscapes on the planet, which is about half the land area on the planet, 30% of that area meets this criterion, 70% is below. So people are not being adequately supported by nature in those spaces. So this provides ways to move forward with planning, conservation, and sustainability activities across landscapes. We know this well from the global biodiversity discussions in the last few years. In intact ecosystems and spaces, we're already at the limit of loss, so we really need to ensure no further loss of intact ecosystems. But within altered or degraded spaces, to look at these sort of local approach to planning. So protect and restore at a minimum 20 to 25% nature in every square kilometer, and what that nature would be would vary with the local context. To focus at the local scale and jurisdictions enables you to put the decision-making in the hands of local governments, local people, community representatives. And I've been given a very hard warning on time now, so I'll leap ahead of this because I think I'll have to make this accessible to you separately, as I won't be able to go through many of these slides. I think if I can just jump ahead to some of the concluding slides. I would like to focus on this one because this really expresses the challenge of carbon inequality, because the issue of equity is a very important one for us to focus on, and it's not moving forward. This image from the Carbon Inequality Report shows the responsibility of carbon emissions for different components of the global population at these income levels. And when you split it out, it makes it very clear that the top 10% of the global population is responsible for half of the carbon emissions, but the most vulnerable people, in the next slide, are those at the bottom. And so we really need to take actions, including in how we do conservation, to redistribute both wealth and risk in terms of future challenges coming up. And the important thing about a lot of the conservation work we need to plan is that the conservation work really helps to not just sustain biodiversity, but also ensure people's needs are being met across different spaces. I think it takes a concept that we have extracted a lot of value out of nature into finance, and we see that accumulating. That value hasn't disappeared. We need to transform it back from finance into natural systems across the planet. And I'll just jump a few steps ahead. In terms of understanding where we need to get to, this slide really emphasizes some of the actions that need to take to get to nature and people solutions. What we have focused on in the biodiversity community, certainly from the science side, is really trying to just, I guess, try and understand how effective can we be. Right now, 2024, we're between that yellow and gray curve over there, and we need not just the most effective biodiversity conservation activities we can have in terms of improving the state of nature, but we need to have priority attention to direct and indirect drivers of decline and to address justice and equity to get to a net positive solution in the future. And this part above is we need to be very realistic, because if we're trying to get governments and communities to really commit to the difficult actions that take 10, 20, 50 years to come to pass, we need to be very realistic about what the final goal.
Kamanga, and will take place in the Marasiana room. Panel 4 will yield in-depth analysis of issues around infrastructure development in Africa and will explore what potential nature-positive solutions exist. The session will be moderated by Ms. Lucy Wariwingi and will take place in the Almasi room on the 3rd floor. Panel 5 will explore issues around fragility and environment and also address armed conflict. The session will be moderated by IUCN Director Madame Nana Touré and will take place in the Pride Lulu Dickens room on the ground floor, au rez-de-chaussée. Panel 6, également au rez-de-chaussée, on the ground floor, will be on inclusive conservation, focusing on issues around equity, rights, and justice. The session will be moderated by Dr. Holly Dublin and will take place in the Pride Hall Solo Jones room on the ground floor. So that, could we please have, I hope they're all here, Honorable Yasmin Fouad, Minister for the Environment of the Arab Republic of Egypt, Dr. Patrick Omondi, SSC member and chair of IUCN Kenya's National Committee, Malidadi Langa, chairperson of the Alliance for Indigenous People and Local Communities, Chedza Heri of the Ubuntu Alliance Zimbabwe. Could you please come up onto the stage and then leave this as a central locking system with great dramatic potential, downstage center. And downstage center, Ms. Chedza Heri, Dr. Patrick Omondi, Mali Dadi Langa, and right. David, your name is down. Right, Madam Moderator, you. So that's a terrible message.
To things like COP28, things like Africa Climate Week. We're talking about financing agriculture without a key. We want
Patrick. I mean, you're coming from the research perspective, and from that angle, and given your experience in biodiversity conservation in Africa, what would you single out as the one or two absolutely critical actions that we would need to move on for Africa?
Thank you, moderator, and thank you, David, for the rich presentation. I think when it comes to research and being a seasoned researcher in the continent, we are very rich on research information. We have so much PhDs. We have publication in high impact peer-reviewed journals. But I think what we have missed is the nexus between research to inform policy and management, so that we do not continue publishing, we do not continue producing PhDs, and the things we research on continue to be lost. I want to give a narrative because most of you will be visiting Nairobi National Park tomorrow, which is next door, and we have the leadership here responsible. Once upon a time, Nairobi National Park was connected through Arthur Kapiti Plains. You'll be explained to. You go to Amboseli and you cross the border to Kilimanjaro. And research has documented the connectivity over the years that we need to save this connectivity. And we have had PhDs, we have a lot of information. Research can map the corridor, you can track the animals, but you cannot secure the corridor and the buffers. So how we communicate to the people who can secure that connectivity is missing. And I think Obura, we have the IUCN Red List on ecosystem, IUCN Red List on species. We know this information. We have all these if-based publications, but are our policymakers making use of it? Are we speaking to ourselves as researchers in journals? So I want to challenge colleagues that we need to get to communicate to policymakers moving forward so that we can reverse the biodiversity loss, secure connectivity, and get solutions that will save nature moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Patrick. And I may come back to you for a final word, David, on that. But first, Malidali, you know, we've heard a little bit from David talk, although some of their slides about equity had to be cut short, unfortunately. But we've heard about the importance of the issues of inclusivities, equities, and rights, and the importance of indigenous people and local communities. So what synergies do you see with the priorities that you have with the Alliance for Indigenous People and Local Communities for Africa?
Thanks so much. Thanks so much for having me and the AICA as one of the respondents. I think for me, the point of departure is that Africa's natural resources and biodiversity have generated unprecedented levels of wealth globally. And unfortunately, it's not Africa nor its people, IPLCs, that have benefited. Yet, it is a fact that Africa's biodiversity remains its most competitive advantage, which it can use for socio-economic development and poverty reduction, and subsequently equity on the ground level. But for this to happen, for us to have a truly inclusive, rights-based conservation, I think there is some need to change the conservation narrative and ensure that people are centered at the whole business of conservation. And this can be done by ensuring that the IPLCs, local communities, are at the table through being represented by legitimate IPLC organizations which are aware funded on a sustainable basis, and this funding is able to anchor local actions that translate into equity, poverty reduction, and biodiversity and climate change goals. So in other words, what I want to underline is that inclusive conservation and equity might in the end translate into investing in human well-being and people as probably the smartest conservation strategy that will save the planet. Thank you.
So much. And it's quite stressful to be here on the panel and have someone come with 1 minute time. So thank you all for your brief responses. David, a final word as the question from Dr. Patrick is, you know, we have the science, we have the traditions, we have the traditional knowledge, indigenous knowledge, we have the action on the ground through the farmers. What's needed to kind of move the needle in creating that movement and convincing policymakers?
Well, I think in the end, we do have a lot of information, and we have a lot of discussion that happens as well. I think what we need is local, inclusive, and accountable decision-making and policy-making. Our governance systems, and I was showing it through the equity graphics on income, but it's the same in other areas. The powerful and the wealthy do not listen to the weaker and the less wealthy. And we need to really focus on people's needs and local needs and have accountable decision-making around those.
Okay, thanks for that. This was a bit of a teaser, and I'll hand it over to you in a minute, so don't give me the 1 minute warning. It was really a taste of what's going to come. I think we wanted to set the scenes, present a little bit some of the challenges. You want to? Sure, go for it.
So I think one voice that we always miss at these conferences is the voice of the media and communications. Scientists are notoriously terrible when it comes to communication. So I think when we're looking at innovation and accelerating action, we really need to invest in ecosystem builders in driving innovation and inclusivity and accelerating the rate of conservation whilst having equitable benefit share. Thank you.
So what I'm having here is quite a bit of interest to jump in the conservation, and I have an MC that is looking at me anxiously. Look, this is the start of the conversation, and we'll have the next 3 days to continue in the various settings. So I would challenge you to be bold, to not hold back your thoughts, to really challenge us, and let's craft together African solutions for that work for Africa, for both people and nature. And with that, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you. Yeah, I don't want to kick out. I've seen the military.
One addition, I'm going to invite young Kevin, and having described him as young, I hope he looks young when he comes, to give a statement from the youth. Kevin. Ah, there he is. He looks youthful. And more youth.
Good morning, Africa. Hello. Good morning, Africa. Good morning, Africa. So these are just a few youth. There's a lot more youth in the hall. If you can just give a big shout, young people here. We must be heard, we must be seen, and thank you for giving us a slot. This is an outcome document out of the last 2 days, young people from across Africa have come to challenge the status quo, to bring our solutions, and to speak truth to power, and to encourage you to work with us, because young people are bearing the solutions, young people are the solutions, young people are working, and we need collaborations. So for the next few minutes, we just read some of the outcomes that came from the different sessions, and then our colleagues will kindly just say their names. The IUCN Africa Youth Conservation Forum, ICOFA, amplifying Africa youth voices and solutions towards creating transformative responses to the biodiversity and climate crisis in Africa. This forum provides a critical platform for young people in Africa to engage in the region's conservation efforts, to participate in policy advocacy for sustainable development. This forum has equipped participants with necessary skills, knowledge, and confidence to implement the IUCN priorities and lead conservation initiatives. The documents we're presenting to you today outlines key messages, insights, and recommendations that emerged from the sessions, ranging from the opening plenary, the various thematic sessions, and closing that is aiming at guiding our future actions and policies for sustainable development and conservation in Africa. So, out of the opening session, a few insights came across the room that young people are engaging in conservation efforts, leading to innovative solutions and sustainable outcomes. Legal frameworks must then be strengthened to support young people, human rights, environmental rights, and sustainability principles. African youth possess the potential and passion to drive effective conservation initiatives if given the necessary support and opportunities. Some of the action and policy recommendations out of the session included enhancing young people's engagement, that we need to develop and implement policies that will ensure active and meaningful participation of young people across conservation efforts. We need to create platforms for young people to voice their opinions and contributions to decision-making processes. We also need to strengthen the legal frameworks, in this case encouraging lawyers and policymakers to draft and enforce laws that uphold sustainability and education around environmental rights. We also need to promote a legal education and awareness programs that are focusing on environmental rights for young people. We need to support African-led initiatives for Africa. We need to invest in and support conservation projects that are led by African youth and African communities. We need to integrate conservation and development, ensuring that we promote youth-led initiatives that could demonstrate the balance between development and conservation. We need to facilitate collaborations, of course, recognizing the need of young people who are not just the future, but the current leaders. On nature and people, we need to train and capacity build young people in ecosystem restoration and nature-based solutions techniques to ensure effective outcomes. We need to recognize the role of financial institutions, that financial institutions must adopt collaborative approaches to support meaningful restoration programming. Private sector has a role in increasing partnerships with youth to drive sustainability agenda at national and pan-African levels. Gender mainstreaming and technology integration, that integrating gender and considerations in technology and conservation projects must then be impacted or implemented to enhance effectiveness and inclusivity. Youth as present leaders, we are not just the future leaders, but current voices of sustainability and nature. So therefore, the action and policy around this is training young people on nature-based solutions, accessible funding, that we need to explore ways to make accessible, adequate, and long-term youth-tailored funding to fund landscape restoration. Youth participation in decision-making, that we need to ensure meaningful engagement of youth in decision-making processes related to nature-based solutions. We need to support local initiatives. We need to promote successful models, highlighting and promoting successful ecosystem restoration in NBS across Africa. On blue economy and thematic, on the blue economy thematic session, the insights ranged from plastic pollution and ocean conservation, that there is an urgent need to shift the habits towards reducing plastic pollution to enhance ocean conservation efforts. Youth are agents of change. We need community engagement. We need holistic conservation, that oceans are as crucial as forests in conservation plans, and the need to prioritize them is equally important. Intergenerational and intersectoral approaches are important, especially around the global biodiversity framework, that we need to really work with everyone. We need to have the whole of society approach. The actions include promoting behavioral change, supporting youth involvement, inclusive communication strategies, equitable strategies, and foster community partnership. On environmental justice, we need individual and group rights. That it's crucial to fight for both individual and group rights, encouraging public initiatives to seek legal redress when their rights are under threat. Ideal development that we need to develop in discovering and nurturing each society's unique strengths and capacities. Democratic development. Development should be democratic, involving listening to and respecting local people's voices. And therefore, the action and policy recommendations are there around promoting legal awareness so that we can implement programs to enhance youth and awareness of legal rights related to environmental conservation, protecting minority communities, inclusive development, and ensuring that local communities are heard. So science and communication, which will be the last one, we need clarity as we communicate these big conservation works. We need relevance in the space. We need engagement through storytelling. Through storytelling, we can capture the minds and hearts of people and the hearts of decision makers. The action and policy recommendations here, that we need to promote clear communication, integrate art in outreach, and enhance storytelling skills. Now, as we conclude, I wish to invite one of my colleagues, Irene, to read the conclusive statement from the team. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Irene Natkunda from Uganda. That's my name and where I come from. And our conclusive statement says, youth are present and future leaders. We have the solutions. We are the solutions. In our unity, we are defining the future of Africa's conservation leadership. Open, accessible, equitable, and just collaboration and support from governments and partners should be prioritized and actualized through the existing and upcoming frameworks and strategies. Make it intentional to work with us. Fund us, the youth, the IPLCs, and the grassroots custodians of our landscapes. We are Africa, and Africa is us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. May we give the honor of the youth to introduce themselves. My name is Kaluki Paul from Kenya.
Victoria Wanjohi from Kenya.
Kevin Lunzalu from Kenya. Maulid Hamisi from Kenya.
Fatima Arabi from Morocco.
Ben Akach from Kenya.
Irene Natkunda once again from Uganda.
Thank you so much for the slot. We'll be sharing the statement with you, and let's work with African youth, because the future is in youth, the future is in Africa, and we need to work with young people to restore our landscapes. Thank you so much.
Mesdames et messieurs, nous pouvons sortir pour 20 minutes et puis revenir. Et voilà. Soyez les bienvenus. Here's our 20-minute break, people. Please exit and let's be back by 10:20 and be seated by 10:30. Thank you very much for your attention.
Chief timekeeper. Chief timekeeper.
Yela. Iroha. Iroha. Nizita nyathi mawero, mama nyathi gidori. Nizita nyathi madwaro, nizita nyathi mawero. Goriga nyathi madendo pile, zita nyathi madwaro. Odori nyathi mawero, nizita nyathi madwaro. Origa nyathi mabaro, nizita nyathi mawero. Zita nyathi gidori, oremo nyathi madedoma. Atieno nyathi mabako, nizita nyathi mawero pile. Zita nyathi madwaro, origa nyathi mawero pile. Zita nyathi madwaro, atieno nyathi mawero ma. Zita nyathi mabako, atieno nyathi madedoma. Origa nyathi madendo, atieno nyathi mawero pile. Kadori nyathi mabako, adundo nyathi mawero ma. Mama nyathi madendo, elga nyathi manduso. Origa nyathi madendo pile. Zita nyathi mawero, atieno nyathi mabako. Zita nyathi madwaro, atieno nyathi mawero ma. Origa nyathi madendo, nizita nyathi mawero. Pamela nyathi mawero pile, zita nyathi mawero ma. Origa nyathi madendo, omolo nyathi mawero ma. Nizita nyathi mabako, atieno nyathi mawero ma. Daria, yeah.
volume here. Good morning. Good morning. Can you all hear me at the back? Can you hear me right away at the back? Thank you. Can you see me as well? I just want to show you some secrets here. Can you see me at the back? Okay, let me do the trick again. Can you see me now? Does this look better? Okay. That means we are ready to go. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. My name is Valina Wokabagali. I'm not going to ask you to remember my name, but I'm going to ask you to be present this morning as we do the official opening of this particular session. I'll be moderating the session and also working with other moderators who will join to ensure that we've got a beautiful official opening for this event. In the meantime, I've just been informed that our dignitaries have just arrived, so they are still going through the exhibitions, so we are a bit behind, so be patient with us. If you have not seen some old faces, please greet them, because the moment we start with the program, you may not have the opportunity to do so. I will also request the DJ to play some nice soft music as we will be waiting patiently for our high-level segment and official opening. Are you feeling good? I can't see though. I can't hear you. Are you feeling good? I can't hear you. Are you feeling good? Awesome. So one of my responsibilities to be the country director for South Africa in terms of IUCN work. And you know how we do it in South Africa. We're going to clap, we're going to shout and make sure that we make this our event, making it lovely, beautiful, but amazingly integrating all the beautiful cultures, all the people from around the world. I've seen the beautiful cultures from the IPLC people, the local communities. I've seen the executives. So I'm very excited to be here. Are you also excited? I'm not getting that one. Are you also happy to be here? Awesome. Let's get some music and then we will be waiting for our high-level delegates to walk in. Thank you very much.
Jambo bwana, habari gani? Mzuri sana, wageni wakaribishwa. Kenya yetu hakuna matata. Wageni wakaribishwa. Kenya yetu hakuna matata. Kenya nchi nzuri, hakuna matata. Nchi ya kupendeza, hakuna matata. Nchi yenye amani, Jambo bwana, habari gani? Nzuri sana. Wageni wakaribishwa Kenya yetu, hakuna nchi wote.
Shall I request that we rise up to welcome our dignitaries, please? Thank you. We can all be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, as I've indicated earlier on, my name is Balinabo Kabagali, the country director for the IUCN in South Africa. We have the privilege as IUCN to host this beautiful Africa Conservation Forum 2024, where all the regions in Africa, including our global partners and members, they come and join us as we look for African solutions for nature and people. This event is one of a special kind because it comes before the WCC, which is going to be taking place next year. However, to go through this particular event for this official opening, I'm going to request my regional director, Mr. Luther Anuku, to give the opening remarks. Over to you, sir. Shall I request that the cameras also allow space? Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.
Dr. Alfred Mutua, the Cabinet Secretary for Tourism and Wildlife, honorable ministers here present, High Excellency Razan Al-Mubarak, the IUCN President, Dr. Greto Aquila, the IUCN DG, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. We are here today. The idea of this forum was born after the first Africa Protected Area Congress, which was held in July 2022. Back then, it looked like a dream, and it took vision and IUCN offices and the government to make this dream a reality today. In recent years, African countries have been expressing more forcefully a desire and the necessity for collaboration and coordination and unity. The Agenda 2063 of the Africa Union, the Africa we want, is a concrete manifestation of the Pan-African drive for unity, self-determination, and collective prosperity under the Pan-Africanism. In so doing, we hope that we can explore a number of initiatives together. And we wanted this forum to provide the opportunity for us to interact and share experiences, and also to present a safe space where we can openly discuss, openly debate, and to revisit the mainstream conservation models that have been deployed in Africa for many years, and to craft noble solutions and to deliver equity for African people and nature. We hope that building on the diversity and wealth of various cultures and experiences within the continent, we can unite and amplify our voices to bring a wind of change that is so much needed to safeguard the nature of Africa, and also to promote the rights of the people of Africa. At this point, I just want to say that it is a great gratitude for all of us to be here, and just want to say welcome to all the various participants who have come from different parts of Africa to join us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Luther. I hope you all feel welcomed, and you have also noted the reason why we are here today. Critical to that, its conservation has been ongoing for the longest times, How do we do it differently? What are the lessons that we have learned? What are the models that works and where? What are the lessons that we have learned to make sure that things are changing and moving quicker and faster? Thank you for that. Let's give Luther a round of applause, please. I would like to now invite the Director General of IUCN, Dr. Gretel Aguila, who will then going to assist us in terms of the opening plenary panel, which, okay. Okay, thank you for those changes. You know, when the program is ongoing, there are a few things that we gotta change, isn't it? We gotta build when we're moving. So allow me to call to the stage or to the podium, Her Excellency, the President of IUCN, Razan Al-Mubarak. Let's welcome him with a round of applause.
Your Excellencies, ministers, dignitaries, IUCN members, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your presence and participation at the IUCN Regional Conservation Forum. Your Excellency, Dr. Alfred Mutua, Cabinet Secretary for Tourism and Wildlife, please rest assured that IUCN, its members, and I are truly honored by your attendance, are truly honored by your presence, which is a true testament to your deep commitment and leadership to conservation. Ladies and gentlemen, I have also learned that Dr. Alfred Mutua and I actually share a deep love, not just for conservation, but for our joint countries. Dr. Mutua used to be a professor at our national university in the UAE called Zayed University. So it's wonderful for us to reunite under the African soil, and in the African soil and in the continent. Thank you, Dr. Mutua. Ladies and gentlemen, hosting this event in Kenya, a country known for its natural beauty and biodiversity, sends an incredible message. It sends a message that environmental protection and climate action are not a nice thing to have. In fact, they are fundamental for growth, for prosperity, for peace and security, and for a sustainable future. It also sends another message, that hope alone will not get us there. We need to plan meticulously. We need to work on operationalizing our vision. And we really need to advocate for audacious new collaboration. And that will get us there. And with that, I'd like to also thank the National Committee of IUCN members in Kenya for their hard work in making this conference happen. Special thanks also goes to the IUCN Secretariat and the IUCN counselors from Africa, whose dedication and guidance are invaluable. A special thanks also, and in our presence, is the former IUCN president, who I'd like to also acknowledge and extend my deep gratitude. Dr. Vali Musa, thank you for being with us today and for your continuous support to an organization that I know we both mutually love. And we cannot stop our thank yous without thanking our foundation. I'd like to thank all the IUCN members present in this gathering. Your effort, your commitment are the foundation of our success, both past, present, and future. So habari zuno, and a warm welcome to everyone here at the Regional Conservation Forum, entitled African Solutions for Nature and People. Under the motto, Stronger Together, this forum brings minds from across the continent to find innovative, localized solutions for our complex challenges and opportunities. But we are also here as IUCN members to shape the IUCN we want and the IUCN we need at this critical juncture for our planet and for our future. As one of the 9 regional forums, this event sets the stage for the World Conservation Congress that will be hosted in the United Arab Emirates in 2025, where the future of our organization and the impact we want it to have will be decided upon. And as Africa is crucial and central to global efforts to preserve nature, to address climate change, and to create a just world that values nature, your role is key in shaping a sustainable future for everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, since its founding in 1948, IUCN has been a leader in the environmental field. We are the oldest and largest network of its kind, with over 1,400 members, including states, agencies, local governments, cities, and civil societies worldwide. Our strength comes from this diversity, allowing us to bring many perspectives and expertise to the table. With more than 16,000 scientists, many passionate members drive our mission to build a sustainable world where nature not only has a place, but where it thrives. We develop and share unique knowledge products, scientifically pragmatic policies that lead global conservation thinking and efforts. And since our inception, we led the development of major global conventions like CITES, like this Convention on Biodiversity and the Ramsar Convention. It has set up knowledge and assessment tools like the Red List, the Green List, protected area classifications, amongst many, many others, that are now fundamental to the nature and sustainable development landscape. So our role as innovators, thought leaders, was crucial in actually creating the modern nature conservation movement of the 60s and the 70s. But we cannot continue to just dwell on the past. We must celebrate it, for sure, but we need to be thinking about the future and what we need to address the complex challenges that not only are we going to face in the future, but we are facing already today. Six months ago, at the UNFCCC COP28 in the UAE, we reached a critical agreement known as the UAE Consensus. And for the first time, nations agreed to make nature central to their climate plans. This marks a unique shift and a major shift, not only in understanding and acknowledging the inextricable link between nature conservation and climate action, but the urgent need to act upon it. This agreement also highlighted the need for a converging approach of the Rio Conventions on biodiversity, on climate change, and desertification, confirming that our environmental challenges are indeed interconnected and must be addressed together. And with all of you, IUCN was central in making this happen and demonstrated its unique value-added proposition. And it showed that as an organization, we are ready to lead in making this convergence a reality. Ladies and gentlemen, we've also known for some time now that unless people, local communities, and indigenous peoples are included in driving sustainable development and nature conservation, there are no solutions. But we need to go beyond mere consultations. We need to authentically engage. We need to authentically co-design the solutions that we need. And this will require a different approach to decision-making. And once again, IUCN, by its constituency and membership, is uniquely positioned to lead the way. And there's no better, no more legitimate place than Africa to lead this transformative approach. The convergence of these issues and challenges, we need to keep innovating, and we need to embrace inclusivity. We need to make sure that as IUCN aligns its strategies with the global environmental targets for 2030 and 2050, that we embrace these values wholeheartedly. Because we're not merely setting plans for the next 4 years. We're setting the path for an ambitious and impactful 20-year vision. And I am confident that with our network of partners, with our experts, with our evidence-based practices, that we will guide our collective efforts not only to stay at the forefront of global conservation, but, ladies and gentlemen, to lead it. Thank you all for your commitment to a sustainable future. And as we move forward, let us be inspired by the spirit of Ubuntu, a philosophy that highlights our interconnectedness and shared responsibility. I am because you are. And with Ubuntu guiding us, let us proceed with hope, but not just hope, but with planning and collaboration and relentless determination. Together, we're not just stronger, we are unstoppable in our mission to protect and cherish our natural world and our common humanity. Thank you. And with that, may I invite the unstoppable State Secretary for Tourism and the Environment to the stage. Dr. Alfred, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I'm very, very happy to be here and to listen to these very wise words by Her Excellency. Innovation, inclusivity, visionary, and it clearly you're quite visionary, unstoppable. And I like the phrase you used that my grandfather used to use all the time, called Ubuntu, I am because you are, and you are because I am. And that is why we're here today. It is my pleasure at this time to welcome you to Kenya. Feel at home. You are the origin or the origin of mankind. So when you're here, you are at home. The President of the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN, Your Excellency Razan Mubarak, honorable ministers who are here, and I want to mention them. We have the Honorable Minister Roger Barrow, maybe you can stand, from the Minister of Environment, Water and Sanitation from Burkina Faso. He's over here, I can see you. We have His Excellency Ahmed Oman, State Minister for Environment of Somalia, is here. We have Minister for Environment of Sao Tome, Honorable Nida Burgess is here. We have Honorable Peter Derry, Minister of Environment for Ghana, somewhere around here. We also have from Kenya, two of our ministers. We have Minister Salim Mvurya, the Cabinet Secretary, my colleague, of Mining, Blue Economy and Maritime Affairs, and Minister, Cabinet Secretary Zakaria Njeru, Minister in charge of water and all matters of irrigation, etc., etc. I'm delighted to welcome you here to Nairobi for the IUCN Africa Conservation Forum, co-hosted by the Kenya government through the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife. We could not have chosen a better time to organize this significant conference, the African Conservation Forum, because it offers much needed regional platform to strategically influence the sustainability agenda, climate change and biodiversity conservation. I listened to the first two speeches and we are really in line with what they said. This forum brings together key stakeholders to discuss some of the most urgent and pressing environmental conservation issues in Africa. It is my hope that through this forum, we can share information and knowledge, build partnerships, and connect key stakeholders from different parts of Africa for a common purpose. The Kenyan government has been a strong state member of IUCN, and we last hosted the IUCN World Conservation Congress in 1963 right here in Nairobi. We have been committed to the values of nature and biodiversity conservation and partnered with the IUCN several initiatives for the provision of science standards and practice. Just last week, I launched a wildlife census to document the number of wildlife we have in our country. The plan is within a year, you'll be able to stop me as the Minister for Wildlife and ask me how many squirrels we have, how many snakes we have, how many mosquitoes we have, and I'll be able to give you a rough idea. This initiative is critical because it is important for us to know what we have so we can plan. We also need to know the movement of animals. During the last climate change initiated drought, we lost over 300 elephants. We lost tons of giraffe. We lost lots of gazelles. And then we had another problem that came about because we had hyenas who are scavengers, had so much food to eat, then because they were full, they bred. And so now we have an explosion of hyenas. So you find how all these dynamics change according to the environment and what we are going through. This initiative of counting animals and what we're talking about today reminds me of a film that I watched when I was young that I've always loved called The Gods Must Be Crazy. Some of you must have seen it. The film that was made in present-day South Africa and Namibia in the Kalahari Desert centers around the theme of how the desert people of the Kalahari live and dwell well with nature and what happens when you're distracted by the tampering of the normal order that can only be attributed to the gods being crazy. Ladies and gentlemen, the theme of the African Conservation Forum focuses on the African solutions for nature and people. We're talking about creating transformative responses to the biodiversity and climate crisis in Africa. Yes, crisis in Africa. It is a crisis that has been caused not by the gods going crazy, but us human beings by tampering with nature. Let me share with you very shortly about the contribution that we have made as a country. Kenya has been the forefront in terms of biodiversity and conservation discussions. With the adoption of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, GBF, at the UN Convention of Biological Diversity of COP15, our country, Kenya, is stepping up efforts to implement GBF targets. The framework seeks to address biodiversity loss, restore ecosystems, protect the rights of indigenous people and local communities, and mobilize over US 130 billion for developing countries by the end of the decade. So people are at the center of this, as Madam President highlighted. It's all about people. It's not just about nature. It's not just nature for nature's sake. It's about the people. It's about protecting our future, our present, and our way of life for the sake of the people. So communities are very important in what we do. Our desire is to identify and implement locally led and appropriate solutions for nature and people. We believe that the NBSAP will enable us to create transformative responses to the biodiversity and climate crisis in Kenya. There are very many challenges that we are facing. Every week I receive on my desk reports of human-wildlife conflict. In Kenya, we are losing an average of 2 to 3 people per week being killed by our wildlife, and many others are injured. We are compensating them. We are trying to work with them. We have to really zero in on the corridors, because nobody deserves to be, nobody deserves to be killed by anything, but nobody deserves to be killed by an animal that you should be living with harmoniously or letting pass. But because of this expansion we've built on wildlife corridors, and elephants, they have this GPS in their brains. Their great-grandfathers used this route, and they'll come and use the same route 100 years later, whether you build your house or not. So we have to find ways of separating people from our beloved animals. We also have developed a wildlife conservation transformation roadmap, which will enable us to be able to plan properly for our future. As I conclude, as we look forward to enhancing African solutions to nature and people, it is important to invest in our biodiversity conservation agenda and encourage collaboration between government, private sector, and communities. And I'm looking forward to the discussion and the panel that we'll have, because it will touch about how we need to finance some of these issues. How do we protect our biodiversity? How do we get together for some of these things? A sustainable conservation model should be inclusive and aligned with the aspirations and dreams of local communities. Let us use the knowledge and insights gained from the forum to influence the global agenda setting at the IUCN World Conservation Congress, scheduled for next year, 9th to 15 October in Abu Dhabi, and we will be there, and the upcoming COP17 and COP30, as we speak with one voice. Basically, talk about COP30, bearing everything we've had from COP17 all through, as we speak with one voice. I want to finish by giving you a story. The other day, I was flying into the national park, and we are landing at this bush airstrip. And there was an idiot, sorry for using that word, who was driving in the middle of the runway. Well, it's in the national park, but they were driving in the middle of the runway with a huge truck, a huge lorry. And we came in and we thought, let's buzz on top so that this person can stop driving in the middle of the runway, because we are arriving and you shouldn't drive in the middle of the runway. But before we could get close to the runway, the supposedly idiot veered off and got into the bush, and we landed. And when we landed, I looked to the side, and the idiot turned out to be one of the largest elephants I've ever seen, walking in nature. That elephant eventually crossed over to one of our borders and unfortunately was killed through a trophy hunting program. Huge elephant, gone. The things that we're talking about here are not just about us, because animals don't have borders. They go everywhere. The animal will travel from all the way from the south to the center to the north, and they have been doing that. We've been tracking them. So whatever we do, we have to realize that whatever you do here is touching others, and that the borders are open. Not so long ago, our president opened the borders of Kenya to the world. You don't need a visa to come to our country, because, as we say, this is where we found the remains of the first person. So when you're coming here, you're coming home. And very soon, Madam President, when you come to Kenya next time, we'll be able to take you to the origin of mankind, and I'll be able to give you a chisel and a brush, take you out there, and you can start digging and looking for your ancestors, because they emanated from here. So I'm very happy at this time, and on behalf of our President, William Ruto, I now declare this function officially opened. Thank you very much.
Now we feel at home. We are ready to go. Let's give a round of applause for the welcoming remarks again. It's amazing how we all come together and we are all connected through the concept of Ubuntu. As I've indicated from South Africa, one of our former state president, well, he addressed the parliament, he said these following words: I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts and the trees, the flowers, the seas and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. I am an African. That feels so beautifully to be in Nairobi, to be in Kenya, and we're still talking about Ubuntu. And this is the concept that has gone worldwide, globally, to say we have got common challenges. We've got the global crisis with regard to climate change, biodiversity and land, but only when we work together, we can get this done right. Let's give again a warm round of applause to the welcoming words. Thank you. Having said that, we're a continent that is sitting with 200 million youth who needs energy to support the decisions that we are doing, who needs energy to lead in terms of the conservation issues, and who are also part of innovation. Part of the statement on by our president, it indicates that what are the opportunities? Where are these opportunities that we can actually provide for our continent? Former President Nelson Mandela said, it always seems impossible until it's done. We have been driving the conservation of strongly. We always ask ourselves, what is next? At this stage, I invite the Director General of IUCN, Gretel Aguilia, who will be then giving us also an opening remarks with regard to moderating the session that is coming up. Thank you very much. Let's welcome Gretel.
So a little bit, let me just correct a little bit. I'm going to moderate a panel because I already addressed you this morning. So, Cabinet Secretary, Minister of Tourism and Wildlife, Dr. Alfred Matua, thank you for being here with us and for your support. IUCN President, dear Razan Al-Mubarak, former IUCN President, Bali Musa, dear members, colleagues and partners. Habari ai asu buhai. Good morning. As a Director General of IUCN, it gives me great honor to moderate this session. But let me start by saying some essential words. A prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. This is stated in the Africa's Agenda for 2063, a great goal. And this is the line that we will follow during this panel conversation. But without further ado, allow me to individually invite the panelists on the stage, beginning with Dr. Dauda Sembene, founder and CEO of Africa Catalyst. Dr. Sembene is a former executive director of the International Monetary Fund and now is a global development advisor. Thank you. Next, it's my great pleasure to welcome on stage Mr. Humphrey Kariuki. Mr. Kariuki, yes, founder of the Janus Continental Group. Thank you very much, Mr. Humphrey, for being with us. Mr. Humphrey Kariuki, business acumen in energy, hospitality, and real estate has made him a private sector leader. He deeply believes in this amazing continent's power and is a strong advocate for wildlife conservation. The next person to come on the stage is not a stranger to IUCN. Our dear Bali Musa, former IUCN president. Welcome, dear Bali. Please come to the stage. Aside from being the former IUCN president, Mr. Musa played a key role in South African freedom struggle, working closely with Nelson Mandela and serving later as Minister in Constitutional Development and then as Environment Minister of South Africa. He has been also IUCN first president from Africa. And finally, it gives me great honor to welcome on the stage Madame Sylvia Museya, Principal Secretary of the Kenyan State Department for Wildlife. Welcome, Madame Museya. Madame Museya needs no introduction, but one thing I wish to highlight is that she is an ecologist by training, and she is also a colleague of as a lawyer, but she said before that she is very proud to be a teacher. So, we welcome her with all of our heart. So, let me now join you on the stage. I think I need a mic. Okay. I don't have a microphone. I don't have a microphone, so let me go back here until they get my microphone. So allow me to, okay. Microphone's coming. So allow me to remind all honorable panelists that we have 5 minutes per answer. I wish to ask you all 2 questions each so that you can share your valuable experiences with the audience. So let me direct my first question to a dear friend of IUCN, Mr. Bali Musa. Mr. Musa, you have successfully held leadership roles in environmental conservation, including serving as the first African IUCN president, as I just indicated, and as a politician at the highest levels of government in South Africa. You have a good view of the intersection of nature and economic development. And so my question is, how can African countries leverage their unique biodiversity for sustainable development? How can African countries leverage their unique biodiversity for sustainable development?
Thank you very much, Director General Gretel Aguilar. Greetings to the President of the IUCN. Very nice to see all of you. And let me start off, Director General, to congratulate the leadership of the IUCN for convening this event. It's something that I could not have missed because I must say to the current president that it's something that I failed during my term, and that is to bring the IUCN together on a continent-wide basis. This is a wonderful event for me. It's almost emotional to see the African members coming together, because part of what we have been lacking globally is the African voice on nature conservation. What is the voice of Africa, and where will it come from? This is the only place really that it could come from, which is the members of the IUCN. The other important thing that I'm seeing here is the participation of members in the IUCN. At the time when I became the president of the IUCN, it was already quite a mature organization. And as organizations go and develop, you find over time that most organizations develop a life of their own. And at that time, we had to ask ourselves, how do we raise the voice of the members of the IUCN? Because this is a very unique organization. There's no other international organization that has the formula for composition that the IUCN has. It's not just a multilateral organization. nor is it just an international NGO, nor is it just an international network of scientists. It's all of these things together. It's the only organization that brings together governments, NGOs, scientists, and nature conservation institutions like Kenya Wildlife and various others. It's the only organization that does that. And I have no doubt in my mind that if today we had tried to form such an organization, it would have been impossible to do. It would have been impossible. A whole range of governments would have said, we're not going to be part of it. A whole range of NGOs would have said, we're not going to be part of it if so-and-so government is part of it because we don't like them. So this is completely unique. It is something that the world must treasure. And I'm so pleased that it's well and it's alive and kicking, and we need to give a lot of emphasis to this. As far as the African voice is concerned, you know, what is the most amazing thing is that Africa is the continent that has the best preserved biodiversity in the world, the best preserved. Yet, the African voice does not come through. You find that the agenda for nature conservation is determined largely by the global north for Africa. Not because they're trying to be bad or anything, but it's just how it is. And it's partly because our own voice is not loud enough, and partly because we haven't done what is said here. We haven't been stronger together. We haven't come together often enough as the African continent. So I do hope, Gretel, that this is an institution this is the beginning of an IUCN Africa institution, and that this conference would be held on a regular basis from time to time, and that it's not just a one-off. The final point I'd like to make is that often African continent is referred to as a poor continent, as the poorest continent. Yes, we have a lot of poverty in this continent, and our guest speaker today, the president of IPAB, has made it very clear, though, that whenever we look at our strategy, we must look at it through the lens of equity. Otherwise, we're going to fail. Unless what we do is about improving the inequality that we have on this continent and the global inequality, we will fail. And part of what we haven't done as the African continent is we haven't funded our own nature conservation work. And actually, there's no reason why we shouldn't do it. Because if I do a back-of-the-envelope calculation about what all the African NGOs spend, all their budgets put together, it's actually quite affordable for us as African governments and African businesses to support. It's not something that we need to depend on others to fund. Yes, we should take money from everywhere else in the world. Nobody will say no to money, of course. But when you depend on others to fund our work, then you will do the programs for which money is available. So the UK will say, we will fund such and such a program, but not that program. And so we will run the program for which we get money. And that is how, without thinking about it, our agenda is set by others. And actually, I'd like to hear from the others here who know much more about money than I do. I mean, shouldn't we just be funding our own NGOs? Because if we don't fund our own NGOs, others will fund them. Shouldn't we fund our own wildlife organizations, our own institutions, our own nature conservation authorities and such things? That's my opening remarks. Thank you, Gretel.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Musa, for those inspiring words that will help us to start this conversation. So thank you very much. Now let me go to Madame Museya. Welcome, and thank you very much to the Kenyan government for their support for us to be here. We are very thankful. Let me ask you, Madam Museya, you are the principal secretary for the Kenyan State Department for Wildlife. You're also an environmentalist by heart, and a lone-serving politician. So how do you think we should manage natural resources while promoting economic growth and well-being in Africa?
Thank you very much, Madam DG. I'm not sure I'm a long-serving politician, given my face and size. I want to first thank IUCN for this partnership that we have done together with the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife to put this together. And congratulate IUCN for a very powerful women leadership. We have both the president and the DG being a woman. I hope the men don't throw the stones. So, directly to the question. Number one, I think it's a place of finding the nexus between natural resources and economic development. I would say that in this country, like many countries in Africa, we have a very well coordinated financial resource management system. Our national treasury knows where every single shilling is and where every single debt is. Our Public Service Commission knows where every employee is, what job group, when are they about to retire. But we do not know where our natural resources are. We do not have a coordination to understand what is the natural resource valuation asset capital. And therefore, we are therefore not very keen to look at the degradation or the appreciation of our natural resources. So I would imagine the first thing would be the State Department for Economic Planning would need to do a valuation of our natural resources and actually plan for it. I also think we have a governance problem of our natural resources. We have too many players, both state and non-state, doing almost the same thing, and we lose a lot in duplication and a lot in the gaps that fall right through in. And this governance is both by people, by organizations, but also by finances. When you look at Kenya, we have a very well coordinated system where we try to plan from ecosystems, landscapes. And we're saying we have a landscape ecosystem restoration plan. However, you find that the natural treasury resources, the development partners resources are all coagulating around one ecosystem at the expense of the other. If you come to Kenya, we have quite a bit of resources around the Amboseli ecosystem, around the Masai Mara ecosystem. Nobody is speaking about Turkana, the origin of our humanity. Nobody is speaking about other ecosystems. So I think we also have a coordination problem. Budgeting needs to be intentional. Africa, we first of all prioritize health, malaria, HIV and AIDS, tuberculosis. Then we prioritize education. Then we prioritize infrastructure. And then we have very little resources left for natural resources. And those resources can only afford salaries. And then we have to go to the development partners to fund our activities. The funding model of the development partners and private sector is skewed. When you look at how it is done, you realize that one, we have consistently refused to fund indigenous peoples and local communities who are at the ground conserving our biodiversity. We've also many times refused to fund government institutions. You fund, I was looking at how much money has come to Kenya for conservation. How much money actually lands to the Kenya Wildlife Service is very little. We fund some NGOs in between here, and then the funding, the amount of money spent on administration, consultancies, meetings, just goes to over half of the budget. Very little finally goes to the... So we need to speak about that. We need to speak about community-based natural resource management. That communities must be at the center and heart of conservation. And therefore, we'll speak about benefit sharing, we'll speak about access rights, we'll speak about free prior informed consent. We have to think about conservation that is not fortress, that does not remove people to make space for conservation. Otherwise, human-wildlife conflict, for instance, will continue to be there. Communities in Kenya, when I became Principal Secretary for Wildlife, every presentation I saw would say 70% plus of the wildlife population is outside protected areas, which means our wildlife is not in our national parks really, and not in our national reserves exclusively. It is the communities. So these communities becomes our biggest partners in terms of making space for conservation. We have lost critical corridors. We need to go back to landowners and tell them, this is a corridor, but you have a title deed to it. What can we do together? So that takes us back to what I said in terms of community-based natural resource management of our natural resources. Of course, research and data, that we have to make policies and decisions from a data-driven point of view. And we have to integrate science and indigenous knowledge. I think I could say so much. We have now a biodiversity economy that we're trying to explore, whether it's bioprospecting, whether it is carbon credits. All this unlocks more sustainable, innovative financing. We now hear things like debt for nature swaps, nature bonds. We are trying to, some of us are still trying to struggle. I hope my panelists at the far right from IMF will indulge me now or later on what that means for governments and for people. I think I'll stop it there now. Thank you.
Many thanks, Madam Museya. People, organization, and finances. I think that is very powerful. But you also align very well with Mr. Musa on the founding model. I think you are echoing that message that we need to change how the money is channeled through Africa. But you also mentioned very important, things like community-based management. So I thank you for that. Let me now proceed to Mr. Humphrey Karuiki.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome, and thank you for coming here to the African Conservation Forum. It is wonderful to have a person from the private sector, because we definitely need to be talking to the private sector, and we need to join forces to make this planet better, and of course we need to join forces here in Africa. So, as one of the Africa's leading entrepreneurs, what can be done to bridge the gap between economic viability in business and nature conservation? And perhaps if you can share with us, what is your secret to have done, a good job in terms of bridging nature and the private sector?
Thank you, Greta. Thank you, Madam P.S., Celia, Barimosa, and Daud Sabene. I would say that I'm not one of the leading entrepreneurs, but I'm just beginning. And first, I would like to thank the IUCN for accepting Mount Kenya Wildlife Conservancy into the IUCN family. And I believe, as a private conservancy, there is a lot of things that we will learn from IUCN, and also the collaborations we will have between the Mount Kenya Wildlife Conservancy and the members themselves. And I thank the IUCN for that. Back to your question. I think there is no magic in what we have done in those years that we have been there. Like now, a good example I'll tell you is I've just come back from trips that I've done in quite a number of countries, from even Tanzania neighbor for 10 days to see what they have been doing, and also somewhere like in Morocco, and see what is the true connection that we have. And I see that a lot of things that are there are within what can be achieved by the African continent. So that is what I feel that we need to also feel that we are part of that. And one of the key things is offering the tax breaks offering the tax breaks that is needed, because when it comes to the issue of the conservation, it is a long-term investment. A good example is like our Bongo program. We have had it for 10, and I think the growth has only been about 5% growth of the bongos that we needed. And yet we need to grow that population to a bigger population where we needed to introduce them to where they existed before. So it's a long-term planning that is required. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And thank you for your thoughts. I take your words that it's a long plan. Perhaps we need to make it shorter because it's such an emergency, you know, that we have in this planet. But thank you very much. Private sector plays a key role in the construction of a better planet. And for sure, IUCN is committed to continue working with the private sector. And thank you for joining IUCN. So let me now turn to Dr. Sembene. So Dr. Sembene, welcome, and also thank you for coming to this forum. You bring a very different perspective, no? And one that we would like to hear. You had spent much of your time working in international finance and economic sectors. So let me ask you, how can African countries effectively mobilize international resources to implement comprehensive environmental conservation efforts across this beautiful continent?
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me to this Africa Conservation Forum, and also thanks to the Kenyan Authority for their hospitality. Let me start by putting things into context. I'm going to be speaking from a financing perspective. A couple of weeks ago in Bonn, in Germany, there was a discussion, and the UN Environment Program, UNEP, estimated that about $200 billion are being invested in nature-based investment every year. So investment that benefit, of course, the environment, nature, and climate. Of course, you would say that this is great, but actually it's not, because I think that's, according to UNEP, represent less than 1/3 of the needs, of the financing needs, actually, to protect nature and also to invest in biodiversity and climate. So if you look at it on that front, so if you ask me what can the international community do for African countries, what I would do is to look at it from one postulate, is that when a country in Africa or elsewhere invests in conservation, they're doing it, of course, for their community, but they're also doing it for the world and for the global community. What does it mean? It means that there are implications. What implication? It means that that country should not bear alone the cost of the financing. It needs to be supported by the international community. And how do you do so? The best way to do so is through grants and, of course, through low-cost finance, or what some call concessional finance. The question is how you can get that. Most of the time, usually in the past several years, it was through ODA, which is still welcome, but unfortunately, ODA has been trending down. So it's not actually giving enough resources for countries to address those resources. So what do you do? Well, I would repeat what the President Ruto has been saying over and over again. When you look at the magnitude of the investment need that we are talking about, you need a fundamental reform of the global financial architecture so that it can mobilize the resources. Thank you. So that it can mobilize the resources that are needed for conservation, for climate, and of course, other priority cost spending. And how do you do so? I think there are many ways. Of course, first of all, you have multilateral development banks. You need to reform them so that they can have more resources, so that they can actually fund more conservation efforts. But the issue with this multilateral development bank, and I can say that I'm no longer at the IMF. I used to be at the IMF. Now I am proudly leading an organization that is based in Senegal and is in the private sector. It's called AfriCatalyst. The issue with multilateral development bank is you can help them mobilize more funding, but the problem is you might not push them to sort of disperse those resources unless you make sure that they are doing so. And I think this is important. What it means is you need to address their systemic risk aversion, especially when it comes to investing in countries like ours in Africa here. So that's one thing. Another thing that you might need to do, I think, from the global community is to be more innovative. I think our co-panelists talked about debt for nature swaps. Well, debt for nature swaps are innovative financing tool for addressing a number of priorities, including conservation. The problem is, unfortunately, it has not been used enough in Africa. And there has been a few countries that did it, whether it's Seychelles, whether it's Gabon, but we are not yet successful in using them at scale. We need to remedy to that. Why? If you look at Africa and you look at the IMF and the World Bank, they estimate that about 21 countries in Africa are either in debt distress or at high risk of debt distress. So if you're talking about those countries, of course you can understand that those countries may find it extremely difficult to mobilize the resources they need for their priority need, and of course also to fund conservation efforts. So unless you come up with initiative that can allow those countries that are facing either liquidity problems or debt sustainability challenges, you might not actually incentivize enough investment into conservation. So how do you do so? You have to make sure that, of course, those countries that are in debt distress are also able to get some funding. And debt for nature swap can be actually one example. Let me remind you, back in the 90s, there was a very interesting initiative that the global community took. It was called the highly indebted poor countries. That initiative, the principle was to sort of relieve debt for those countries in exchange for them to use the savings for more social spending. Why don't we try to think about some similar initiative for nature, for conservation, for climate? I think that's very much timely to do so. Last but not least, I think one area where African countries might need to really do more is about mobilizing more funding through green bonds and blue bonds. This is something that many other countries are doing. Right now, it is estimated that the market, the green bond market, is about $2 trillion back in 2022. And out of those $2 trillion, how much are we talking about for Africa? Well, Africa's share was 0.1% of green bond issue. There is so much scope for actually increasing that share so that countries can be able to mobilize more innovative financing for these conservation efforts. I think this is critical, this is timely, and this is urgent. And I would hope that the countries would be really pushing and think more seriously about how to really use those innovative instruments to mobilize more funding for conservation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sembene. I mean, we want you in IUCN. I think that, we have been talking about this innovation that you just mentioning, but I think that the conservation movement is just not there. And we have a lot to learn so that we can move forward and really use these new tools, these instruments. Some of these instruments, like Swaps for Nature, are not new. We just need to use them better. But thank you very much, because it's very, very important to say that, because currently it's not working. But thank you very much for your message. Let me now go to the second round of questions. And let me start with Mr. Karuiki. So, Mr. Kauriki, as an African businessman, what is your message from Africa to the private sector, to governments, and to the conservation community?
Thank you, Greta. Yeah, I think for ourselves, I'll talk from what we have been able to get it from our practical experience. One of the things that you must, when you are getting into this side of the business, you must think of a long term. It's not a short term. It's a long-term investments that you are making. And one of the things is, how do you merge the sustainability of your business? And one of the key things that I have seen always is the tourism, how the tourism helps to be able to bring in the trickle of the businesses in the economic effect. One of the key things, how do you create these jobs to the communities? Because without the community, as Madam P.S. has said, most of the parks are within the community. So how do we bring the community to be part of us? One of the things that we have been able to do successfully is to create that in Mount Kenya Safari Club is the number of the employees that we are able to employ to be part of from the community. And one of the things that I have seen practically is, for every tourist who comes, it is supported by 5 people. from the agriculture to that person who is a driver, to the person who is a guide. So you can imagine that if a country like Kenya was able to raise its tourism from the current numbers to 5 million, it means you will get 25 million people to the job industry in this country. Tell me somewhere else that can bring that kind of number from poverty to having a job. And it's the easiest. And when I look at a country like Kenya, the fundamentals are all there. If you look at the hotels that we have, if you look at the parks that they are well organized. So that's one of the things that I can say that from the private sector, they can approach the ministries there, and those tenders are already out and advertised for the people to take advantage of that. And I would like not only the Kenyans, but also the African people to get in, and also the other people to help us to overcome the challenges we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Important, because I think that we all in this room know that there is no conservation without the well-being of people. And jobs are essential, and green jobs are even more essential. So thank you for your words. Let me return to you, Dr. Sembene, and continue the conversation. But this time more focusing on how can national policies be tailored to encourage greater private sector involvement in environmental conservation. I think that, coming back, to the countries, to the policies, and to the role of the private sector, what are your views?
Well, there are fundamentally three ways the government can support the mobilization of funding or financing for conservation. It's through policy, it's of course through regulation, and it's through incentives. So when we talked about policy, I think the two tools that the government have is the budget and fiscal policy. I think if, for instance, government wants to incentivize funding or sort of investment in conservation, they might, of course, consider using tax breaks or stuff like that. But unfortunately, we are in a situation where many countries do have little fiscal space for using those type of tools. So what you might want to look at is, of course, the regulatory tools. So I think it is critical for countries in Africa and many other places in the world to have effective and strong PPP framework for incentivizing investment in conservation. So if you look at, for instance, the management of protected areas, it does make little sense that actually the funding or the costs that are associated with such a sort of endeavor are borne by the public sector or the state itself. There are so many ways to find, lucrative PPP with adequate risk-sharing provision to involve better the private sector. And this is critical, something that many countries have not done so far. That's one. Another issue is if you want to incentivize private sector to invest in conservation, you need to address the risk that many investors are facing when they want to invest in many African countries. And when you talk about risk, you're talking about two types of risk. There are the actual risks. So if there are some sort of credit risk or political risk or those type of things, those are actual risks that needs to be addressed for investors to come in. And the best way to do it is to use sort of de-risking instrument or credit enhancement instrument. And that's where the MDB is coming, and also the international community can help with that. But what we need to remember is de-risking or risk mitigation and credit enhancement can help with actual risk. But the problem in Africa is we are not only facing actual risk, we are also facing risk perception that are not sometimes very much objective at all. Last year, the UNDP came up with a study that estimated that because of the differential between actual and perceived risk in Africa, by credit rating agencies, African countries was paying $74 billion more in debt service because of that gap, that differential that is due to the subjectivity that I guess affect the credit risk assessment by big credit rating agency. This needs to be addressed, and the best way to address it is to put more transparency and accountability for credit rating agencies, but also to empower local credit rating agencies in Africa so that they can also do a good job. I'm not so sure creating new credit rating agencies by African states would help, but at least there are some private credit rating agencies that could be empowered and supported. That's one. Another way to sort of involve more private sector is to operationalize Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. When we talked about carbon markets, this is a good way to make sure that you can also involve private investors. Unfortunately, we are still running behind. There is not much done on that front. You cannot have effective carbon market if you don't solve the carbon pricing issue. It doesn't make sense that the same carbon is priced, let's say, 10 times less in Africa than in Europe or in the US. You need to address that issue. Another issue that you need to address is, I think it has been said by the minister earlier in his intervention, you need also to give value to natural asset and capital. I think so that it can also benefit those countries like Kenya that have sort of natural park and forest and that protect them to help sort of protect the environment. They also need to get something out of it, and I think this is critical. And my final point, I think, to really on this front is if you really want to make sure that the private sector is involved, you need also to have feasible and bankable green projects. That's unfortunately a problem in Africa. Many investors would tell you that they want to invest, and there are so many opportunities for green investment around the world. But I guess sometimes the problem is finding some bankable project on the continent of large scale that can attract a large scale financing from private investment. And I think this is something that government needs to address, how by making sure that they invest in project preparation, green project preparation, conservation project preparation, so that those investors, whether they are actually green, like impact investors or green investors, can really come in and power in some funding for African countries to be able to sustain and fund conservation efforts.
Thank you very much. Dr. Simbene, investments in conservation. I think we all want that. And of course, we have to walk the talk, reduce risk, and of course, talk about the value of natural resources that, of course, it's not just natural capital, but also it has an intrinsic value. So to put those two worlds together, I think it is very essential for everybody in this planet. Let me now move to Mr. Musa. And so, Mr. Musa, you know, in Africa, and you know this better than me, you have this amazing energy of young movements and people full of ideas, full of energy. It's amazing. I mean, this is happening across Africa. But then, how can we ensure that the future generations in Africa inherit a rich and biodiverse continent? How can we ensure them a future that is, you know, is sustainable, the future that they can embrace and continue grow?
Thank you very much, DG, for that question. But I want to just address our host minister here, because I think I'm a little bit older than him. And I think I'm a little bit older than the president of the IUCN. And I'm not on the IUCN Council, and I'm not in any government. So I don't really understand protocol. So it means I can speak freely. You know, the question that Gretel is asking, how do we take things, African nature conservation, a step further? I just want to be very practical. This is a very important event. It's really the beginning. And could it be, I think it could be, a permanent feature in the life of the IUCN? In other words, every 4 years or so, we would have the Africa Conservation Forum. Thank you. Hosted, of course, under the umbrella of the IUCN. But let me just say that if I look at this conference, it's a reasonably modest event. we should really want to fund it ourselves to start off with, so that it really does happen, so that we don't look at others to fund our own event where we're coming together. And I think as the African continent, we could do that. Nobody, people speak about the poverty of the African continent, but not many people speak about the tremendous growth of the African economy. In my country, in South Africa, when I first became a cabinet minister in 1994 up to now, the economy is 6 times the size than what it was then. The same story holds true for Kenya, Nigeria, all over the show. So the economy is growing. We've got big, powerful private sector institutions in this country, so we can do it. The second point I want to make, because I don't understand protocol, is that, if you leave it to the democratic decision-making in the Council of the IUCN, these people are very difficult to manage. The Council of the IUCN, they are very difficult to manage because they are all full of ideas, good ideas. So if we want this thing really to become an institution, it should have a home. Now, you see, my colleague here has mentioned tourism, ecotourism, and its contribution. Kenya is the world leader in ecotourism. There's no question about it. And we from South Africa, when my second term as minister, I was Minister for Environment, I came on a tour here to Kenya quietly just to see what you people are doing. And you had this concept of safari, which is a Kenyan concept, and we then monopolized the concept. We pretend like it's our concept because people want to go on safari. We say, come to South Africa. But it's really Kenya has invented all these things. Why should Nairobi not be the permanent home of the African Conservation Forum? And that, as I say, because I don't understand protocol, I can say, I'm going to offend a lot of people here. But you would have big, important events. Take, for example, Davos. That's not an event that goes around the world all of the time. This is not a government institution, the African Conservation Forum. It's not a government institution. And when governments hold things, then they need to have democratic decisions about where it goes. But it could be built into something very special if one knows that it has a home, and if the Kenyan government can be invested in it, because it will become invested in it. The other point I'd like to make is that, as governments and as private sector, we often want to criticize the NGOs. We say they are doing things to irritate us, which they do that. But that is their job. Their job is to irritate us. And because over the past few decades, there has been a whirlwind of democracy that has been sweeping over the African continent, our NGOs will continue to exist and grow, regardless of what we may say. And I must take my hat off at the Kenyan authorities and their relationship to the current protests that are going on. The Kenyan government has not said it's illegitimate. Well, I have not read the bill, so I can't comment on the bill, but what I can say is that the government has said you've got the right to express yourself and protest. Of course, nobody has the right to do illegal things and violence and such things. But here you can see that these are the kinds of things that will continue to happen. So if we don't fund our NGOs, we as governments and we as the private sector, be certain that somebody else will. And those who will do it have got their own reasons for doing it. And we should be funding our environmental NGOs even if they irritate us. It's fine. Let them irritate us with our own money. Because if we don't, they're going to be irritating us with the money that is coming from hostile governments. Why do that? And so I think this is what I'd like to say. I think, Gretel, if we can establish this as an institution, we would, let's take Kenya and South Africa. I don't want to be now personal about it, but, I'm from South Africa. We have so little coordination between our environmental and nature conservation strategies. We are not the only ones, but we are two leading countries on nature conservation on this continent. And actually, we don't have one voice, which is ridiculous. And we don't need anybody else to tell us, because both these countries have the scientific depth, indigenous scientific depth, to be able to lead as far as this is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I hear you, Mr. Musa. I hear you very clearly. So thank you for your words. You not only know about protocol, but you're also a great speaker. So thank you very much. Let me go now to Madame Museya, and allow me to close this panel with you, Madame Museya. So we have been talking a lot about, hearing African voices. Since the pre-forum started, we hear this phrase, we are here to hear African voices, because if nature thrives, people thrive. So what is your message to Africa and to the rest of the world?
Thank you very much. My messages will be 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 is to elevate and coordinate the governance of natural resources better internally in our own individual countries, and without, in terms of our transfrontier, cross-boundary conservation efforts. Until recently, I think the Ministry of Environment, whether at the national level or at county governments, was one of the least traffic offices. Nobody really visited Minister for Environment. But when you compare with Ministry for Roads, Water, Health, the traffic of people, of money, of events is very heavy. And even today, the traffic of people to the Ministry of Environment or to the Ministry of Wildlife has only been elevated for quote-unquote cowboy business of carbon credits recently, and UNFCCC and a few other things. So we need to coordinate. CASA is doing a good transfrontier boundary conservation. In the same spirit, number 2, we need to learn to speak in a unison voice. I'm afraid to say in one voice, but in some sort of rhythm that rhymes as an African continent, and take the African position to UNFCCC, to CBD, to CITES. We have such divergent views on how we approach the conservation of our nature as a continent. So we somehow need to try and have some sort of rhythm towards it. The same spirit, number 3, is to implement MOUs that we have signed between our countries and that we have committed in international law. You remember that every week my CS, Alfred Mutua, is being reminded that we need to conclude with the Attorney General an MOU on conservation with Ethiopia, with Zambia, with Nigeria, ahead of the President's visit that is coming up in July. And then after we sign those MOUs, they stay in our shelves. Very few people know the contents of those MOUs. Even the ones of us who sign in high-level government depend on our legal officers to tell us, yes, you can go ahead and sign. After it is signed, it becomes part of the commitments we've done also in international law, where we are signatories to CBD, we are signatory to the Paris Agreement. Yet, in government, in civil society, we still do not understand what Article 6 of the Paris Agreement says. When we look at our commitments under the CBD that we've signed, I think people just know 4 or 5. I think the highlight is 30 by 30. The other 23 commitments or agendas, very few people understand. We have to look at the place of youth, indigenous communities and local communities, IPLCs and youth, because we have a youth problem across Africa. Their unemployment rate is high. is a trigger for some of the problems we are facing today as a country, and that some of you have faced and others are about to face. So we need to know how to engage our young people. Young people need to wake up in the morning and go to an application platform we have as a government called Jazamiti. Jazamiti is Fill Your Tree. We have a 15 billion tree planting campaign as a government. We have an application that's supposed to monitor it. But for as long as young people wake up in the morning and go to WhatsApp and TikTok and Facebook, and they do not interact with nature, conservation education and awareness programs in schools, most of them stopped or stalled. We do not have a youth that is awoke to the importance of conservation of nature. They do not understand it. They do not relate it with it. And therefore, all the efforts we do as NGOs, as governments, as long as the young people do not relate with it, then we are not moving in tandem. I think we also have to place research and data in a very important pedestal in terms of how we do our conservation. And to the research scientists in the room and research institutions in the room, it needs to just stop being about ecology, connectivity, biodiversity, endangered and threatened species, red list. It needs to be that, but it needs to be more. What are the other social economic research data that is very keen and very key to conservation? In this aspect, we would be wondering, we have a bushmeat problem in Kenya. Do we correlate taking of bushmeat to zoonotic diseases? Is that one thing that can then trigger people to stop doing bushmeat? Do we correlate tourism, ecotourism, which we are drive as a country, to benefits then accrue to the communities that support the ecotourism within our countries and within our communities? Or will communities continue to look at tour vans, get into Masai Mara and live, get into these conservancies and live, and the only benefit we are saying to the communities is some small employment opportunities, which are usually very low-key. It's usually a waiter, a watchman, a cook. So is it enough, and what can we be supposed to do? Of course, the question of sustainable, innovative financing is important. But who is the driver of this sustainable, innovative financing? Are we, as a country, also taken hostage by international conversations around green bonds and nature bonds and debt for nature swaps? I think that's my message. My message is that we are here. This conference does not come cheap. We've all invested from the countries we came from, air tickets and per diem for people. What comes out of a meeting like this, like very many others that we attend as high-level delegates on behalf of our countries, on behalf of our communities? Will we see IUCN give us a status report with short-term items that must be implemented, number 1, number 2, number 3, and who is to implement? Do these reports reach governments? Do they reach development partners? Are they acted on? Or we will go to the World Conservation Forum 2025 in Abu Dhabi, and the last brief I'll be reading on the plane to Dubai is this meeting, trying to wonder, what did we say? And yet we have done nothing about it. And as I close my remarks, conservation is an expensive venture. When I have delegates come to Nairobi in their numbers, heads of states, CEOs of private companies, ministers and PSs, CEOs of organizations, and all they write to me as principal secretary is that they want, not just a small, a whole a waiver to pay Nairobi National Park entry fee. Then I wonder, who is supposed to support conservation? You get proper per diems. You do not ask for a waiver for the bill at the hotel or for a drink around town in the evening, but we want us to waive for you off a visit to Nairobi National Park. How will we sustain conservation if conservationists themselves do not want to pay the price of conservation? And when IUCN asked for this waiver, I told them as much. I told them the government of Kenya is committed to supporting you in A, B, C, but I'm not committed in waiving conservation fees, because then it negates the same reason why we are here. And by ending, I still welcome you to Nairobi National Park for a game drive that we have organized tomorrow. I hope IUCN you shall pay. But maybe my DG for Kenya Wildlife Service said we are trying to speak in one voice. He would give a small concession, but not entirely. I don't know, DG, if that is the position. It is. So you have a citizen rate, but at least there's some rate. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Museya. I hope that we're not starting a negotiation here. but thank you very much for your very clear messages about international conventions and bringing that to the national level, but more importantly to implement it together with the people, and of course the need of research and data. So with this, let me, before we finish, give a few thanks. First of all, thank you to all the panelists. We have gone from finance to the private sector to the IUCN heart and what we need to do in Africa and IUCN, to, of course, the very clear words of Madame Museya here in Africa and in Kenya. So thank you very much. Please join me with a round of applause. And before we finish, let me just thanks once again the Ministry of Tourism and Wildlife, the Hempel Foundation, the Climate Subnational, and many others that have made possible this forum. So thank you very much for all. And now is the time for a picture. So thank you very much.
So as we are getting another picture, I will also want to request the leadership of IUCN, the regional directors, come closer. Well, we'll have one for the panelists and the president and the DG. So the regional directors, the councillors, please come closer so that we can finish the photo session. Please. I would also like to invite all the ministers from the African countries. Please join the photo shoot. Ministers. Thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause for a great session. So the key announcement about the lunch break, we are moving to the lunch break now. So the delegates will exit the room with different doors where they will get different color vouchers, lunch vouchers. So all those who've got a green color, top floor on this hotel, orange voucher, you'll be going across to Ole Sereni. And then for the purple color, you will go to Acacia, I think it's third floor in this. On top of that, it's to also request that there's QR code. If you want to download the program, an updated program, there's a QR code that has been put on the doors. So please do so. In terms of time, you have noted that we are way behind time. So I'm still going to request that all the sessions are going to start at 1:30, please. All the sessions are going to start at 1:30 as planned so that we can proceed with the program of the day. Thank you very much. Let's break for lunch and we'll see you in all the high-level sessions and the panels that we're going to have this afternoon. Thank you very much.